Okay, so in the last tutorial we looked at just creating a class, built variables, and we started this whole idea that you could declare a data type called bubble with might be 2, might be 3. Again, the whole intent here is not to put all this customization in here just so we can have one bubble. We want to have a whole bunch, a couple hundred maybe, right? And again, I think I did this in class the other day with it. So we talked about we can have a float data type or an integer data type or a bubble data type. And maybe it's just me, but I know sometimes I struggled with what are the required words and what are my own variable names. So I wanted to make this analogy here with the class so that we have bubble, right? So we have bubble my be. And I guess the example I made in class is if we had another data type, it could be called person Rick, okay, or person Susie. Oops. Okay, so the person is a couple analogies. So this would be the required word if I had a class named person. In this case, we have bubble. And sorry, my cat's in the room trying to distract me. So we have the declaration of the data type, and then Rick would be, or Susie would be the individual, and it's also the variable name that we would use, right? So I'm just going to delete that. Of course, in this instance, it wouldn't work because we haven't declared anything called person. But I thought maybe that would be helpful. So let's get rid of this and this. And this. So let's get back to just one. What I'm going to do here is show you how to create a whole collection of it. So let's go ahead and say maybe 100 of them. So the format here that's going to change is what we're going to do is create a list of bubbles. Okay. So instead of like we had a second ago, we said bubble might be 2, might be 3. We're going to create an array. Okay. An array is like saying oops. So we're going to create a list, and let's say we're going to create a list of floating point numbers. So we could have 100.7, okay, and 98.6. And just so you know, this is just an example. This is just as if I was up on the chalkboard here. And let's do 65.3. Okay, so we'd have this long list. So this number in the brackets here is its position in the list, and computers start counting from 0. So at index 0, the very first in the list, it would be this number. Position 1, the second in the list, it would be that. Blah 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 blah. So we can do the same thing with bubble, and the way this gets written. And you can use arrays for objects or numbers or whatever. You can have a list of anything. So we say I'm going to have a bubble data type that we're going to put into a list. Okay, so we're going to actually have a list of these bubbles. And we'll just name it my be. And then we're going to come down here to the bottom. Sorry, into the setup. And there's several various ways. I could put some of what I'm going to put here up here as well. But I'm going to say my B equals, oops, I did want to copy this one. Let's just do it that way. Okay, so my B equals new bubble. But instead of the constructor, what we have to do is tell it the list. Okay. And let's see if this runs. Oops, this guy won't run. Let's comment him out. All right, so we have everything's running. We have no bubble on the screen. And let's recap. So first we need to declare what this is. So we're going to have a list of bubbles, and we're going to call that each instance of that my be. And then at the beginning here, when we say float h, Processing wants to know, Java wants to know how much space to save for this thing. How many of these are there going to be? Of course, in this instance, there's just one, and it's a floating point. So it's like, it's cool, I can handle that. When we do an array, we have to tell processing how many of them there are going to be, or else it gets angry at us, okay? So, and when we access that array, we can always access any of them that fall between 100 of them, so between 0 and 99. But we can't access, index value 105. That would be more than the list itself, right? And that's where you run into problems all the time. Okay, so we need to create 100 of them. We don't want to do this by hand as I did before with my b1, my b2. So what we're going to use is a for loop. So first let's just type this out and then we'll explain what it is. For integer I equals 0, I is less than 100, I plus plus. And there's some, if you're a more advanced user, certainly there's some shortcuts we can use here, but I'm not going to do that for now. Let's just get started with the basics. Okay, so here's a for loop. Get used to it. You're going to use them. So in the for loop, we start off by saying integer I equals 0. Now, and this could be any integer. I could give this I could call this k if I want, right? Because it's in the for loop, we're just going to use this I variable just within these open and close brackets, okay? If I went down here and said integer I, 95, okay? So in here, this would say integer equals 0, and then the next part, so that's the declaration, and then the conditional is, well, is I less than 100? If it is, run this code, and when you're done, do this little operation. So plus plus just means add 1 to the existing I, so this would become 1. So then it comes back here and it says, well, is this less than 100? Well, it's 1, sure it is. All right, run this code in here and then add to it, right? When it's done and it does all those commands, then it forgets that it even knew what integer I was, and now we can declare it again and use it somewhere else. And that's probably not good practice to do that, using I that way, outside of the for loop, but as you'll see, you can loop through lots of different things. So this is a way of, there's lots of different ways we could do this. We could come up with different numbers so that we could use it for position, any number of things that we'll see in this class. But the most standard is to go through a list, right? And run through and create or draw them, right? So let's go ahead and say, what do we call this? My B. I'm just going to simplify this and just call it B. It makes for easier code here. So B, and then this is in a list, right? So this equals new bubble. And let's see if we get any, oops, that's right, change that. Just so I want to get down here. Okay, so no errors. So what we've done is we've declared that we're going to have a list of these. We've told processing, and that list is going to be 100 long. And then we've created 100 of them, right? So let's go down here and let's just say B47 dot run. Okay. Oops. All right, so we have one B in the list running on the screen. Let's do this, and let's say 93. All right, so it's saying go to index value 47, so the 48th in the list, or 93, and draw that one. So when this gets created, each time it gives it a unique float x and y and assigns them, and then it has these sets of instructions, right, that get run independently over here. And obviously this is not the, we we don't want to type out all these numbers again, we're going to use a for loop. But I wanted you to see that that I represents a number, okay? We're just using the for loop to generate 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go all the way up to 99, so less than 100, to create those. So we're going to do the same thing down here. Let's just copy this, and we'll get rid of those. And we'll auto format, and then we want to say .run. Okay, so go through that list of the different bubbles and run each one of their separate run functions. Okay, so there we have that. We could, well, let's add some variation to this. Sorry, so we can see what's going on here, right? We've created, and they all look similar. I mean, keep in mind they all have a pretty similar kind of randomization in there. But we can add more variables to this, right? So while we're working here, let's just do float r. And let's say r equals random, what do we, okay, let's say 10 to 100. And so right now they all have the same ellipse. So if we create a variable called r, and again, this could be any variable name, and at the very beginning, when it creates it, just once put a new value into r for this bubble anytime you create one. And now let's just put that down on the ellipse, right? If we put this down here, it would change the width and the height every single time, right? But here, it just sets whatever it's going to be at that beginning. So let's run that here. Okay. And likewise, let's go up to here and say integer total. And there's different ways to do this. We could tell it whatever the length of what this list is, that would be the total. But here, it's just my own little thing. I like to just use that integer right off the bat. We'll show more complicated ways to do that later. But now, if I just use total as a variable, if I decide that I want the total to be something else, in fact, I'm just going to do it right up here at the top. Let's say 250. Right? Fire that up. Okay. So you can see now now that I set that once, it changes the size of that here, the length, I should say, and that's the length of the for loop here and there. Again, there's a slightly different way to do this, but we'll save that for later. And then the last bit of this, run out of time, is you can add some variation to what this would be. Let's say float c. And c equals random. And because we're going to put this into the R value of the RGB, we'll just say random 255. And far away. And maybe what we do is we come in out background. Maybe we come up here and say, you know what, the stroke is pretty soft. So anyways, there you can see we've gone through and we've added some variability to the class itself, and we've run through a for loop to create a whole bunch. Hope that helps.